I'm 52 years old, and for the past 10 years I've been raising something in my home that shouldn't exist. Her name is Marina. At least that's what I've called her since the night I found her dying on the rocks below my house in October 2014. She's a mermaid, a real one. And 3 days ago, her mother surfaced in the cove outside my research station, looking for what I took. My name is Dr. David Brennan. I'm a marine biologist, or I was before all of this happened. I spent 15 years studying coastal ecosystems along the Pacific Northwest, publishing papers on tidal zone biodiversity, teaching occasionally at Portland State University. I lived alone in a converted lighthouse research station on a remote stretch of the Oregon coast, 12 miles south of Cannon Beach. The isolation suited me. After my divorce in 2011, I'd grown comfortable with the rhythm of solitary work, the sound of waves against rock, the predictable cycles of tide and season. I need to tell this story now, because I'm out of time. Marina is 10 years old. Her mother has been circling my cove for 3 days, calling to her daughter with sounds that make my windows vibrate. And I have to make a decision that will destroy me no matter what I choose. This is exactly what happened. I won't ask you to believe it. I'm just going to tell you the truth. October 17th, 2014. The storm hit the coast around 8 in the evening, moving in faster than the Weather Service had predicted. I'd been through dozens of coastal storms in the 5 years I'd lived at the station, but this one was different. The wind came in sustained gusts that I later learned topped 90 miles per hour. Rain hit the windows horizontally. The ocean turned black and violent, waves reaching heights I'd never seen from my position on the cliff. I was in my main room, monitoring my equipment and watching the storm through the reinforced windows, when the power went out around 10:30. I switched to my backup generator and grabbed my flashlight. Standard procedure during outages was to check the tide pools below the station. Storms sometimes trapped marine life in the upper pools, and I'd often find injured seals or disoriented fish that needed help getting back to deeper water. I put on my rain gear and made my way down the wooden stairs built into the cliff face. The steps were slick, and the wind kept trying to push me sideways. Salt spray mixed with rain made it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. I should have waited until morning, but something kept pulling me forward. I've thought about that a lot over the years, why I went down in those conditions, whether some part of me sensed what I'd find. The tide pools at the base of the cliff formed a series of natural basins carved into the rock over thousands of years. I knew every pool, every channel between them. I swept my flashlight across the largest basin, expecting to see nothing more than churning water and debris. Instead, I saw something small and pale, wedged between two rocks in the shallow end of the pool. My first thought was seal pup. We got them occasionally, separated from their mothers during storms. I moved closer, climbing down into the pool itself, the water up to my knees, cold even through my waders. The beam of my flashlight caught the creature's face, and I stopped moving. It wasn't a seal. The face was wrong. Too flat, the eyes too large, set in a skull that was unmistakably humanoid. I moved the light down its body. Arms, hands with webbed fingers, a torso that looked like a human toddler's, and below the waist, where legs should have been, a tail. Fish-like, covered in scales that caught my light and reflected it back in shades of silver and blue. I stood there in the freezing water, rain hammering down, staring at something that couldn't exist. The creature wasn't moving. For several seconds I thought it was dead. Then I saw the gills on its neck flutter weakly, struggling to process the turbulent water. It was drowning, or whatever the equivalent is when a creature with gills can't get enough oxygen from water too violent and aerated to breathe. I didn't think. I reached down and picked it up. The creature was small, maybe 18 inches from head to tail tip, and lighter than I expected. The skin felt like a dolphin's, smooth and cool. It didn't react to being lifted. The eyes stayed closed. Getting back up the cliff stairs while carrying the creature and holding my flashlight was the hardest thing I'd done in years. The wind kept trying to knock me over. My hands were numb. Twice I nearly dropped the creature. By the time I reached the top, I was shaking from cold and adrenaline and something else I couldn't name. I brought it inside and stood in my entryway, dripping water onto the floor, holding an impossible thing in my arms. The creature's breathing was shallow, labored. There was a gash along its left side, probably from being thrown against the rocks. The tail had multiple lacerations. I had a large saltwater aquarium in my lab room. I used it for temporary observation of specimens I collected from the tide pools. The tank held about 200 gallons, maintained at the correct temperature and salinity for local marine life. I carried the creature to the lab and lowered it gently into the water. For the first few minutes, nothing happened. The creature sank to the bottom and lay there, motionless. I watched the gills, counting the time between each flutter. 15 seconds. I started preparing myself for it to die, wondering what I'd do with the body, who I could possibly tell about this. Then the gills started moving faster, more regularly. The creature's eyes opened. They were large and dark, with pupils that contracted in the light from my desk lamp. Fully aware, intelligent. The creature looked at me, and I saw what I'd seen in the eyes of dolphins I'd worked with during my graduate research. Recognition. Understanding that I was another thinking being. The creature made a sound, not speech, something between a chirp and a whistle, soft and questioning. "You're okay," I said, though I had no idea if that was true. "You're safe now." I spent the rest of that night monitoring the creature. I treated the wounds with antiseptic, working as carefully as I could. The creature flinched but didn't try to escape or attack. It watched everything I did with those large, intelligent eyes. By 3 in the morning, the bleeding had stopped. The creature had moved to the surface of the tank and was floating there, breathing more easily. I pulled a chair next to the tank and sat down, exhausted. The storm was still raging outside. Rain pounded the roof. And in my laboratory, in a saltwater tank meant for observing starfish and sea anemones, floated something that would rewrite everything we knew about marine biology, about evolution, about what was possible on this planet. The creature made that soft whistling sound again. Then it did something that made my breath catch. It raised one small webbed hand out of the water and touched the glass of the tank where my hand rested on the outside. Deliberately. A gesture of connection. That's when I knew I couldn't report this. Couldn't call anyone. Couldn't let the scientific community, the government, the media know what I'd found. Because this wasn't a specimen. This was a child. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the tank, watching the creature recover, trying to process what I'd found and what I was going to do about it. By dawn, the storm had passed. Gray light filtered through the windows. The creature was swimming in slow circles around the tank, testing its mobility. The wounds I'd treated were already showing signs of healing, faster than any mammal I'd studied. I made coffee and tried to think logically. Marine biologist finds unknown species. Standard protocol. Document everything, contact colleagues, alert relevant authorities, begin formal research. This could be the discovery of the century. My name in every textbook. A complete revolution in our understanding of human evolution, of marine adaptation, of cryptozoology. But I kept coming back to those eyes, to the way the creature had reached out and touched the glass, to the fact that it was small, young, vulnerable. And I kept thinking about what would happen if I made that phone call. At best, the creature would become a research subject, confined to a laboratory, studied constantly, treated humanely perhaps, but never free. Scientists from around the world would want access. Tests, measurements, tissue samples, genetic analysis, every moment of its life documented and analyzed. At worst, it would disappear into a government facility. I'd heard the rumors during my graduate studies, whispered stories about agencies that handled discoveries that didn't fit official narratives, creatures that were found and never seen again. I'd always dismissed those stories as conspiracy theory nonsense. But sitting there, looking at something that wasn't supposed to exist, I wasn't so sure anymore. And there was another consideration I couldn't ignore. If this creature existed, there were probably others, a population somewhere in the ocean. And if I revealed this one, if I brought attention to the fact that such beings were real, what would happen to the rest of them? How long before every marine research vessel and fishing boat was trying to find more? How long before they were hunted, captured, studied, exploited? The creature surfaced at the edge of the tank closest to me. It made a series of soft clicking sounds, then that whistling noise again. Different tones this time. Communication, I realized. It was trying to communicate with me. "I don't understand," I said. "I don't know what you're trying to tell me." The creature tilted its head, a gesture that was eerily human. It clicked again, slower this time, as if trying to make itself understood. Spent that entire day with the creature, calling in sick to the university for my scheduled office hours. I offered food, starting with small fish from my specimen freezer. The creature examined the fish carefully before eating, showing preferences I noted in my field journal. It liked sardines but rejected salmon. It accepted shrimp, but only certain species. By evening, I'd made my decision. I wasn't going to report this. I was going to keep the creature here, hidden, safe, at least until I understood more about what it was and where it had come from. I told myself it was temporary, that I'd figure out the right thing to do eventually. I started converting my basement the next day. The space was large, originally used for storage with a concrete floor and good drainage. I spent $3,000 I couldn't really afford on equipment: industrial filtration system, heaters, salt mix, UV sterilizers. I designed a pool system that could hold 1,500 gallons with varying depths and a section shallow enough for the creature to rest partially out of water if it wanted. The construction took 2 weeks. I did all the work myself during hours when I knew no one would be around to ask questions. My nearest neighbor was 4 miles away, but I was careful. I told people I was building a better research facility for my work. Not technically a lie. During those 2 weeks, the creature stayed in the aquarium tank. I'd named her by the end of the first week. Marina. Simple, obvious, maybe too on the nose, but it felt right. She responded to the name, or at least to the sound of my voice saying it. Marina grew stronger. The wounds healed completely within 10 days, leaving no scars. She was curious about everything. She'd watch me work on my laptop, her face pressed against the glass. When I played music, she'd become very still, listening. Classical music, particularly strings, seemed to fascinate her most. She'd make soft vocalizations in response, matching the tones she heard. I started keeping detailed notes. Not the formal scientific documentation I'd been trained to produce, but personal observations. Marina appeared to be about 2 years old developmentally based on her size and behavior. She showed problem-solving abilities similar to a human toddler. She understood cause and effect. She recognized me as an individual separate from other humans she'd seen through the windows. The intelligence was what convinced me I'd made the right choice. This wasn't just an animal. Marina was a person. A different kind of person, adapted to a different environment, but a person nonetheless. And you don't turn a person over to be studied like a specimen. When the basement pool was finished, I moved Marina into her new home. She swam the perimeter immediately, exploring every corner, testing the depth. Then she surfaced in the shallow end and made a sound I'd never heard from her before. Longer, more complex, almost song-like. If I didn't know, I would have said it was pleasure. I sat on the edge of the pool, my feet in the water. Marina swam over and touched my ankle with one webbed hand. Then she dove down, disappearing into the deeper section of the pool. I'd done it. I'd committed to this course. I had a mermaid living in my basement, and no one in the world knew except me. The first year with Marina was the hardest. Not because she was difficult, but because I had no framework for what I was doing. No manual on raising a mermaid, no research to consult. Every decision was made in isolation, with nothing to guide me except instinct and observation. Language development happened faster than I expected. Marina couldn't produce human speech. Her vocal anatomy was different, adapted for underwater communication, but she understood English within the first 6 months. I'd talk to her constantly while going about my daily routine, narrating what I was doing, asking questions I knew she couldn't answer. One day I asked her if she was hungry, and she nodded. A clear, deliberate nod. I tested it. "Are you tired?" She shook her head. "Do you want to play?" She nodded again. From there, we built a basic communication system. Yes and no gestures, pointing for objects she wanted. I taught her simple sign language, modifying the signs to accommodate her webbed fingers. She learned quickly, showing me signs for food, water, play, sleep within a few weeks. Her vocalizations were complex. I recorded them and analyzed the patterns using audio software. The sounds had structure, syntax. She wasn't just making random noises, she was speaking in her own language. I couldn't learn it, couldn't reproduce the sounds she made, but I started recognizing certain patterns. A series of clicks meant she was content. A higher-pitched whistle meant she needed something. A long, low tone meant she was stressed or uncomfortable. Marina was growing. By the end of the first year, she'd gained 6 inches in length and developed better control of her movements. Her tail was stronger. She could leap partially out of the water, something she did often, especially when excited. Her face was changing too, becoming less infant-like, more defined features. I maintained my work at the university, teaching my classes, conducting my official research on coastal ecosystems. I published 2 papers that year, both on topics completely unrelated to what I was really studying every day in my basement. My colleagues noticed I'd become more withdrawn, declining social invitations, spending less time in the office. I told them I was focused on a long-term project. Another lie in a growing list of lies. Feeding Marina required constant adjustment. She was omnivorous, I discovered. She ate fish, obviously, but also seaweed, kelp, small crustaceans. I brought her variety from the tide pools, supplemented with fresh seafood from the market. She preferred her food raw but would eat cooked fish occasionally. She was fascinated by human food, wanting to try everything I ate, but most of it made her sick. Bread caused digestive issues. Dairy was particularly bad. I learned to stick to what worked. The pool required maintenance. I tested the water daily, adjusting salinity, monitoring temperature, cleaning the filters. It was like having a full-time aquarium, except my specimen was a thinking being who watched me work and sometimes tried to help, usually by splashing water at me when she thought I was taking too long. Marina loved books. I'd bought a set of waterproof children's books originally intended for bath time, thinking she might be interested in the pictures. She was fascinated. She'd press her face close to the pages, studying every illustration. I started sitting by the pool every evening, reading to her. Simple stories at first. "Good night, Moon." "The Very Hungry Caterpillar." She'd make soft sounds while I read, her version of listening. By the second year, she could recognize written words. I'd hold up cards with simple words and pictures, and she'd sign the corresponding word. Fish, water, friend. That last one I'd taught her to describe our relationship, and she used it often, the sign for friend becoming her most common gesture when she greeted me each morning. I was teaching her about the world she'd never fully be part of. I brought down my laptop sometimes, showing her videos of ocean life, documentaries about marine ecosystems. She'd watch with intense focus, making excited sounds when she recognized species similar to herself. Dolphins particularly interested her. She'd try to mimic their sounds, coming surprisingly close. Music remained her favorite thing. I installed waterproof speakers in the pool room, playing everything from classical to jazz to contemporary songs. She had preferences. She loved cello music, piano, anything with complex melodic structure. She'd swim in patterns that matched the rhythm, a kind of underwater dance. But there were hard moments, too. Times when Marina would become agitated, swimming in rapid circles, making distressed sounds I couldn't soothe. She'd stay in the deepest part of the pool for hours, refusing to surface even when I called her. I'd sit there feeling helpless, wondering what she was feeling, what she was missing. Sometimes she'd stare at the small window near the ceiling of the basement. It was at ground level outside, offering a limited view of the ocean in the distance. She could hear the waves from there, smell the salt air when I opened it, and I'd see something in her expression that looked like longing. I knew I was making choices for her she couldn't consent to. She was safe, fed, cared for, probably healthier than she would have been in the wild. But she was also confined, separated from whatever family she'd been born into, cut off from others of her kind, if there were others. I still didn't know. The question haunted me. Where had she come from? How had she ended up alone in that tidal pool during the storm? Were her parents looking for her? Did mermaids have parents the way humans did? Or did they raise their young differently? I had no answers. Only Marina, growing up in my basement, learning my language, trusting me completely. And I was the only person in the world who knew she existed. Marina turned 5 in October 2019. I marked the anniversary of finding her with a small celebration, unsure if she understood the concept of birthdays, but wanting to acknowledge it somehow. I brought down a waterproof cake, really just compressed fish and seaweed shaped into a cylinder with a single candle on top. She found it hilarious, laughing in her way, a series of high-pitched chirps and whistles that meant joy. She was nearly 4 feet long now, her tail powerful enough that she could launch herself completely out of the water when she wanted. Her face had lost all traces of infant softness. The features were striking, beautiful in a way that was almost, but not quite human. Large eyes that shifted color in different lights, dark blue in shadow, lighter gray-green in direct light. High cheekbones, a mouth that could smile, and did, often. Reading had become her obsession. I'd progressed from children's books to young adult novels, anything I could find in waterproof format or that I could seal in clear plastic. She understood complex narratives now, remembered plot points across weeks, asked me questions about characters' motivations using a combination of signs and vocalizations I'd learned to interpret. Her favorite book was The Little Mermaid, the Hans Christian Andersen version, not the Disney adaptation. I'd been hesitant to read it to her, unsure how she'd react to a story about a mermaid who wanted to become human. But Marina had insisted, pointing at the cover repeatedly until I agreed. She'd listened to the entire story in one sitting, completely still. When I finished, she'd looked at me and signed sad, then beautiful, then touched her chest, the gesture we'd developed for feeling or emotion. I asked her once if she wished she could walk on land like the mermaid in the story. She'd thought about it for a long time before responding. Then she signed no, followed by ocean and home. But she'd looked uncertain, and I realized the question was more complicated than either of us had words for. Marina asked about the ocean constantly now. She wanted to know about everything I'd studied, every species I'd encountered. I'd bring her samples from my tide pool research, shells and starfish and sea urchins, placing them in her pool so she could examine them. She'd study each one carefully, sometimes making sounds that I swore were commentary, observations in her own language. I started letting her help with my research in small ways. I'd bring her samples to identify, photographs of fish to classify. She was better at it than me, spotting differences I'd miss, understanding behaviors intuitively. I wondered sometimes what kind of scientist she could have been if circumstances were different, if she'd been born human, or if I could somehow integrate her into the human world without exposing what she was. But that was impossible. Marina couldn't pass for human. Even if she could have lived out of water, which she couldn't for more than a few minutes, her appearance was too distinctive. The webbed fingers, the gill slits on her neck, the way her skin had a faint iridescence in certain lights. She'd be recognized immediately as something other, something impossible. So she stayed in the basement, and I became the bridge between her world and mine. By her 7th year, Marina had developed her own routines. She'd wake around 6 when I came down with breakfast. We'd eat together, me sitting on the pool edge, her floating nearby. I'd tell her about my plans for the day, and she'd sign her own preferences, usually requests for certain books or music or sometimes for me, to bring down my laptop so she could watch videos. She'd started creating things. I'd given her waterproof art supplies, thick crayons that could write on plastic sheets, and she'd begun drawing. The images were abstract at first, patterns and shapes that might have been random, but gradually they became more representational. She drew the ocean, waves and fish and underwater landscapes I'd never seen. She drew me surprisingly accurate portraits that she'd present proudly, holding them up for approval. And she drew other mermaids, dozens of them. Adults and children, detailed illustrations that showed varieties I hadn't imagined, different tail shapes, different colorations, different facial features. I didn't know if these were memories or imagination, if Marina was drawing her family or creating an idealized version of what her people might look like. I asked her once, using the simple signs we had, "Do you remember others, like you?" She'd looked at me for a long time, then signed yes and no simultaneously, holding both gestures, and I understood. She remembered something, but not clearly. Impressions, not details. She'd been too young when we'd separated. That night I lay awake, thinking about what I'd done. Marina was happy, I told myself. She was healthy, educated in her way, cared for, but she was also alone, the only one of her kind in a human world. And I was the one who'd made that choice for her, who continued to make it every day I kept her hidden. The guilt was getting harder to carry, but so was the alternative. Revealing Marina meant losing her. She'd be taken, studied, separated from me, and I'd come to love her. Not as a research subject or even as a pet, but as the daughter I'd never had. The thought of losing her was unbearable, so I kept the secret. And Marina kept growing, kept learning, kept trusting that I knew what was best for her. I didn't. I was making it up as I went, hoping I wouldn't ruin her life more than I might already have. Marina turned 8 in October 2022, and something shifted. The change was subtle at first, easy to miss if I hadn't been paying attention. She started spending longer periods in the deepest section of her pool, 20 feet down where the water was coldest and darkest. When I called her name, she'd take longer to surface. Sometimes she wouldn't come up at all until I physically entered the water. Her appetite decreased. She'd pick at her food, eating just enough to satisfy me, then pushing the rest away. I worried about illness, ran every test I could think of with my limited equipment. Temperature normal, gills functioning properly, no visible injuries or signs of infection. Physically, Marina was healthy, but something was wrong. The drawings changed too. She stopped creating the varied scenes she'd been making for years. Now she drew only one thing, over and over: the ocean. Specifically, the view from her basement window. She'd recreate that limited glimpse of distant water in dozens of variations, different times of day, different weather conditions. She'd hold up each drawing and stare at it for hours. I asked her what was wrong using every combination of signs and gestures we'd developed. She'd just touch her chest, our sign for feeling or emotion, then point toward the window. When I asked if she wanted something, she'd sign ocean, and then a gesture we didn't have, something new, her hands moving in a way that suggested distance or separation. One morning in November, I came down to find Marina had arranged objects on the shallow shelf of her pool. Shells I'd brought her over the years, pieces of coral, smooth stones. They were organized in a specific pattern, concentric circles radiating out from a central point. The precision was striking. This wasn't random arrangement, it was deliberate. "What is this?" I asked, crouching by the pool. Marina surfaced and signed memory, then touched her head, then pointed at the pattern. "You remember this? From before?" She signed yes, but the gesture was uncertain, incomplete. I photographed the pattern, studied it from different angles. It looked like a map, or maybe a diagram. The central point could be a location. The The circles could represent territory or population or something else I couldn't interpret. I showed Marina nautical charts on my laptop, pointing at different areas of coastline, asking if she recognized anything. She'd study each image carefully, but never confirmed recognition. Whatever she remembered, it wasn't specific enough to pinpoint. The sounds changed too. Marina had always been vocal, her language of clicks and whistles a constant background presence. But now she was making different sounds. Deeper tones, more complex patterns. She'd make them late at night when she thought I wasn't listening. I recorded them, analyzed the frequencies. They were calls, long-range communication signals, the kind dolphins use to contact pod members across miles of ocean. She was calling for someone, and no one was answering. I tried to distract her, brought new books, played different music, introduced new foods and activities. She participated dutifully, going through the motions to please me, but her heart wasn't in it. The spark that had defined Marina's personality, her curiosity and enthusiasm, was dimming. By December, she'd stopped drawing entirely. She'd stopped asking for books. She spent most of her time at the deepest point of the pool, only surfacing when necessary. When I'd join her in the water, trying to engage, she'd touch my hand briefly, a gesture of acknowledgement, then drift away. I was losing her. Not to illness or injury, but to something I couldn't fix. Depression, maybe, or homesickness for a home she'd never truly known. The realization hit me hard. I'd thought I was enough for Marina, that the life I'd provided was sufficient, but she was reaching an age where she needed more, needed others like herself, needed the ocean and whatever family she'd been separated from. The guilt I'd been carrying for years intensified. I'd made the choice to keep her, convinced myself it was for her safety. But maybe it was for me. Maybe I'd been selfish, keeping her isolated because I couldn't bear to lose her, and now she was suffering for it. I started researching in earnest, something I should have done years ago. I scoured reports of unusual marine sightings, searched databases of cryptozoological encounters, read everything I could find about mermaid legends and folklore. Most of it was nonsense, obvious fabrications or misidentifications, but there were a few accounts that made me pause. Fishermen reporting glimpses of humanoid figures in deep water, sailors describing sounds that didn't match any known marine species. All along the Pacific coast, scattered reports spanning decades. If mermaids existed, and Marina was proof they did, there had to be more. A population somewhere in the ocean depths, and Marina, approaching adolescence, was somehow aware of them, remembering them, or being called to them by instincts I couldn't understand. On Christmas Eve, I sat by the pool with a waterproof tablet showing Marina videos of the open ocean, deep sea footage, kelp forests, coral reefs, anything to gauge her reaction. When I played footage from the Monterey Bay Aquarium's deep sea cameras, something changed in her expression. She moved closer to the screen, her eyes tracking something in the footage. A rock formation, maybe, or a specific depth marker. Then she made a sound I'd never heard before. Loud, urgent, almost painful to hear. She signed home, then pointed at the screen, then signed mother. My hands were shaking. "You remember your mother?" Marina signed yes and no again, that same contradictory gesture. Then she touched the screen where the deep water appeared darkest, most remote. She made that calling sound again, the one she'd been making for weeks. And for the first time I understood what she'd been doing. She wasn't just calling randomly, she was trying to reach someone specific, someone who might still be looking for her after all these years. I turned off the tablet. Marina watched me, waiting. "I don't know how to help you," I said. The admission felt like failure. "I don't know where your mother is. I don't know how to find her." Marina touched my hand. She signed friend, then thank you, then moved her hand to her chest. Feeling. She wasn't angry at me. She was trying to tell me she understood I'd done my best. but her best and mine weren't enough anymore. That night, I made a decision. I'd spent 8 years keeping Marina hidden, isolated, safe. But safety wasn't the same as happiness. And Marina deserved more than what I could give her. I didn't know how I'd do it yet, but I needed to find a way to return her to the ocean, to give her a chance at finding her own kind, even if it meant losing her forever. The thought of it felt like drowning. January 2023 was cold and wet, normal for the Oregon coast in winter. I'd been formulating a plan to gradually acclimate Marina to the open ocean, thinking about how to safely transition her from the controlled environment of the pool to the unpredictable waters beyond. I hadn't told her yet. I wasn't ready to see the hope in her eyes, wasn't ready to commit to letting her go. The decision was made for me on January 19th at 3 in the morning. I woke to a sound that didn't belong. Low frequency, powerful enough that I felt it more than heard it. The windows were vibrating. The water glass on my nightstand was rippling in concentric circles. I sat up, disoriented, thinking earthquake. But the shaking was rhythmic, pulsing, not geological. The sound came again, louder, a call from somewhere outside, from the direction of the ocean, deep and resonant, nothing like any marine mammal I'd studied. It lasted for 15 seconds, then stopped. Silence. Then it came again, slightly different in tone, like a question being asked. I grabbed my robe and ran downstairs to the basement. Marina was thrashing in her pool, swimming in frantic circles. When she saw me, she launched herself halfway out of the water, making sounds I'd never heard. Urgent, desperate, joyful. She kept pointing toward the window, toward the ocean beyond. "What is that?" I asked, though I already knew, or suspected, feared. Marina signed "Mother" over and over so quickly the gesture blurred. Then home and family and signs I didn't recognize, new gestures she was inventing in her excitement to communicate. The call came again from outside, and Marina answered. Her voice was loud enough that I covered my ears, a long, complex vocalization that carried harmonics and overtones impossible for human vocal anatomy. She was calling back, telling someone she was here. I stood frozen, watching her. 8 years of secrecy, of hiding, of keeping her isolated and safe. And now something from the ocean was calling to her, and she was answering, and everything I'd built was about to collapse. I went upstairs and grabbed my flashlight, pulled on boots, and walked down to the beach. The tide was high, waves crashing against the rocks at the base of the cliff. The moon was nearly full, casting silver light across the water. And there, about 200 yards offshore, I saw something surface. Large, much larger than Marina. The moonlight caught scales and reflected back in patterns that hurt to look at, colors that didn't quite make sense. A head emerged, then shoulders, then a torso rising impossibly far out of the water. The figure was easily 9 feet long, maybe more, proportioned like Marina, but fully adult, powerful. The creature made that sound again, louder now that I was closer. The call was directed at the cliff, at my house, at Marina hidden in the basement. And I understood. This wasn't random. Whoever this was, they were looking for something, for someone. I ran back inside. Marina was at the surface of her pool, pressed against the side nearest the ocean, making continuous sounds. She was crying, I realized. The sounds were mixed with what could only be sobs, gasps between vocalizations. "Marina," I said. "Marina, listen to me." She turned, her face wet. I'd never seen her cry before. Didn't know she could. "Is that your mother, out there?" She signed yes, emphatic, certain. Then she signed please and ocean and pressed both hands against the pool wall as if she could push through to the other side. "I know," I said. "I know. But we have to be careful. We have to think about this." Marina made a sound that was almost a scream. Frustration and longing and accusation mixed together. She'd been patient for 8 years. She was done being patient. The call came from the ocean again. Closer now. The creature had moved toward shore. I could see her more clearly through the window, illuminated by moonlight. She was circling, searching. The movements were agitated, distressed. I thought about what I'd learned from the videos I'd shown Marina, about the deep-sea locations that had triggered her recognition. I thought about the storm that night in 2014, the violence of the weather that had separated a very young Marina from her family. And I thought about a mother who'd lost her child to that storm, who'd been searching for 8 years, who'd somehow tracked her daughter to this stretch of coast. The creature in the water made another sound, different this time. Not a call, a warning. She'd sensed Marina's response, knew her daughter was nearby, and was demanding her return. The tone was unmistakable, furious, desperate. 8 years of grief and searching compressed into that single vocalization. Marina answered, her voice breaking with emotion I'd never seen from her. I sat down on the edge of the pool, my head in my hands. This was it, the moment I'd been unconsciously dreading for years, the moment when Marina's real world collided with the artificial one I'd created for her. "She's been looking for you," I said. "All this time. She never stopped." Marina touched my shoulder. When I looked up, she signed sorry, then friend, then love. The last sign was one I'd taught her years ago, never quite sure if she understood it. She understood. "I love you too," I said. "That's why we have to figure out how to do this right." The creature outside made another sound, and this time I heard something different in it. Not just anger, fear. The fear of a parent who's found her child but can't reach her, who's sensing danger or obstacle. She was afraid someone was hurting Marina, keeping her trapped, which was exactly what I was doing, however benevolent my intentions. Marina dove to the bottom of the pool and retrieved something from where she'd hidden it, the shell pattern she'd created weeks ago. She brought it to the surface and held it out to me, insistent. Then she pointed at the tablet I'd left on the shelf, signed, "Ocean," and pointed at the pattern again. She was trying to tell me something. The pattern wasn't just memory, it was information. Location, maybe, or instructions for finding something. Her home waters, wherever mermaids gathered. I took the tablet and photographed the pattern again, this time with better lighting. The arrangement of shells and stones was precise. If this was a map, I needed to decode it, needed to understand what Marina was trying to communicate before I made any decisions. The creature outside called again, and Marina called back. And I sat there between them, holding the key to a reunion I wasn't sure I was ready to facilitate. But ready or not, the choice was being taken from me. Marina's mother had found us, and she wasn't leaving without her daughter. Chapter 8. The Confrontation. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. Marina stayed at the surface of her pool, pressed against the wall facing the ocean, making continuous soft calls. The creature outside had stopped responding after that last exchange, but I knew she was still there, waiting. I stood at my living room window as dawn broke, scanning the water. She surfaced at 6:43 just as gray light spread across the cove. Close to shore this time, maybe 50 yards out. In daylight I could see her clearly. The resemblance to Marina was unmistakable. Same facial structure, same coloring. But where Marina was still developing, this creature was fully mature, powerful. Her tail was thick with muscle, her arms longer and stronger. Her hair, if that's what it was, flowed dark and long around her shoulders. She floated there, watching my house, waiting for something to happen. I went down to the basement. Marina saw my expression and signed, "Now?" with desperate hope. "Not yet," I said. "We need to understand what's happening. I need to know she won't hurt you." Marina signed "Mother" emphatically, then "Safe," then looked at me with an expression that clearly communicated I was being an idiot. "You were 2 years old when I found you," I said. "You've been gone for 8 years. You don't know how she'll react, whether she'll blame you for being gone or blame me for keeping you." Marina made a sound of frustration, then dove to the bottom of the pool. I'd disappointed her. Added to the years of disappointment, the daily choice to keep her confined while her mother searched. I felt the weight of every decision I'd made settling on my shoulders. I went back upstairs and grabbed my binoculars, watching the creature from the window. She wasn't doing anything aggressive, just floating, watching, occasionally dipping below the surface, then reappearing. Her patience was eerie. She could wait. She'd been waiting for 8 years. A few more hours meant nothing. Around noon, I made a decision. I walked down to the beach, moving slowly, keeping my hands visible. The creature tracked my movement, her dark eyes following me as I approached the water's edge. I stopped at the high tide line, keeping a safe distance. "I know you can't understand me," I called out, "but I need you to know I didn't hurt her. I saved her. She was dying when I found her." The creature didn't respond, just watched. "She's safe," I continued. "She's healthy. I've been taking care of her all these years. But she's yours. I know that. I've always known that." The creature moved closer, not threatening but deliberate. She was maybe 30 yards away now, close enough that I could see individual scales on her tail, the gill slits opening and closing on her neck. Her face was expressive, intelligent, and angry. Not the hot anger of immediate rage, but the cold, sustained anger of someone who's been wronged for a very long time. She made a sound, not the long-range call from last night, but something shorter, sharper, a question or demand. "I'm going to bring her to you," I said, "but I need to do it safely, for both of you. Can you understand that?" The creature tilted her head, a gesture exactly like Marina's. Then she made another sound, softer, and she nodded. Just once. Clear understanding. My breath caught. "You understand English?" Another nod. Not fluent, maybe, but she'd understood enough, or understood tone and body language well enough to interpret meaning. Either way, communication was possible. "Tomorrow," I said, holding up one finger. "I need 1 day to prepare, to make sure Marina's ready, that this happens the right way. Can you give me that?" The creature stared at me for a long moment. Then she made a sound that could have been agreement or warning. She dove, her tail disappearing beneath the surface. But she didn't leave. I could see her shape moving in the deeper water, circling the cove, keeping watch. I went back inside and called the university, told them I was taking emergency leave. Family crisis. Not technically a lie, depending on how you define family. Then I went to the basement. Marina was waiting, hopeful and anxious. I sat on the edge of the pool and signed for her to come close. "Tomorrow," I said. "I'm going to take you to her tomorrow." Marina's expression transformed. Joy and relief and fear all mixed together. She launched herself out of the water, wrapping her arms around my neck, making sounds that were definitely crying. Happy crying, or scared crying, or both. I held her, feeling how much she'd grown, how strong she'd become. She wasn't the dying infant I'd pulled from that tidal pool anymore. She was nearly grown, capable, ready for a life beyond these walls. And I was about to give her that chance, even though it felt like tearing my heart out. "I need to know you'll be okay," I said. "I need to know this is what you want." Marina pulled back and signed yes with absolute certainty. Then she signed mother and ocean and home. Then she touched my face and signed friend and father and love. "I'm not your father," I said. "I just found you. I just helped." She signed father again. Insistent. In every way that mattered, I was. I'd raised her, taught her, kept her safe. Biology didn't change that. "What if she won't let you come back?" I asked. "What if this is goodbye?" Marina looked at me for a long time. Then she signed, maybe. She knew this was a one-way door. Once she left, everything would change. But she was willing to accept that. Needed to accept it. We spent the rest of that day together. I brought down her favorite foods, played the music she loved, read to her from the books she'd enjoyed most over the years. We went through her drawings, all the ones she'd created and I'd saved. She pointed out details I'd missed, using signs to explain what each image meant. The patterns were memories, she told me, fragments of her life before the storm. Places she'd been, things she'd seen, people she'd known. That night, I slept on the floor next to her pool. Marina stayed near the surface, her hand occasionally reaching out to touch mine. Neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. We were saying goodbye, and everything that needed to be said had already been signed. Chapter 9. What Marina revealed. Morning came too quickly. I woke to find Marina already awake, floating at the surface, her attention fixed on the window. The sun was barely up, gray dawn light filtering through. I checked the ocean from upstairs. The creature was there, closer to shore than yesterday, waiting. I'd spent the previous evening preparing. I'd found a large tarp, the kind used for covering boats, that I could use to transport Marina safely. The beach was rocky and steep in places, and I'd need to carry her. I'd also gathered her favorite objects, things she might want to take with her. A few shells, one of her drawings, the waterproof book she'd loved most. When I came down to the basement, Marina was ready. She'd arranged herself at the shallow end of the pool, waiting. Her eyes were bright with anticipation and terror. This was everything she'd been wanting for months, and it was terrifying. "Before we do this," I said, "I need you to tell me something. The pattern you made, the shells and stones. What does it mean?" Marina swam to where she'd reconstructed the pattern on the pool shelf. She pointed at the center stone, then signed "Home." Then she pointed at the surrounding shells, making a circular motion, and signed "Family" and "Others." "It's a map of where your people live?" She signed "Yes," but also "Memory" and "Young." She was telling me this was from when she was very young, that her memory wasn't complete, but it was something, a location somewhere in the ocean where mermaids gathered. "Can you show me on a real map?" I brought down my tablet and pulled up nautical charts of the Pacific coast. Marina studied them carefully, her webbed finger tracing the coastline. She paused at several locations, uncertain, then continued. Finally, she stopped at an area about 60 miles offshore, where the continental shelf dropped into deep water. She tapped it repeatedly, then signed "Maybe" and "Deep" and "Home." I marked the location, took screenshots. If Marina left and never came back, at least I'd have some record of where she'd come from. Some proof beyond my own memories that this had all been real. "One more thing," I said. "I need to understand what happened the night I found you. Do you remember the storm?" Marina's expression changed. She signed "Yes," then "Mother" and "Together." Then she made a violent gesture, her hands moving in a swirling motion. "Storm." She signed "Separated" and "Lost," and touched her chest. "Fear." "Your mother was with you during the storm?" Marina signed "Yes" emphatically. She made swimming motions, then the storm gesture again. She'd been with her mother when the storm hit. They'd been separated in the chaos. Marina had been swept away, injured, lost, and her mother had been searching ever since. "She must have been terrified," I said, "losing you like that." Marina touched my hand. She signed "You" and "Saved" and "Thank you." Then she signed "Mother" and "Now" and "Together." She was ready to close this circle, to return to the parent she'd lost 8 years ago. But she was also afraid her mother wouldn't recognize her, wouldn't accept her after so long, wouldn't forgive the years of absence. "She'll recognize you," I said, hoping it was true. "You're her daughter. That doesn't change." I helped Marina into the tarp, making sure she was comfortable. She was heavy now, close to 80 pounds, much of it muscle. The walk to the beach was difficult, but Marina didn't complain. She made soft sounds, nervous vocalizations that I'd learned meant she was processing strong emotions. When we reached the beach, the sun was fully up. The creature was there in the shallows, waiting. When she saw us, She made a sound that resonated through my chest. Recognition and relief and something that might have been accusation. She moved closer, her eyes fixed on the bundle I carried. I waded into the water up to my knees, the cold biting through my boots. I lowered Marina into the shallows, unwrapping the tarp carefully. Marina stayed still for a moment, feeling ocean water for the first time in 8 years. Then she moved, her tail flexing, propelling her away from me and toward the larger mermaid. The creature, Marina's mother, made a sound I'd never heard, high and pure and full of emotion that needed no translation. She moved forward, and Marina met her halfway. For a moment, they just stared at each other. Then the mother reached out, touching Marina's face, her shoulders, her tail, checking for injury, for reality, for proof this was actually her child. Marina was making sounds continuously, crying again, her whole body shaking. Her mother pulled her close, wrapping her arms around Marina, holding her the way I'd held her that first night. The way you hold something precious, that you thought you'd lost forever. They stayed like that for several minutes. I stood in the shallows, watching, feeling like an intruder on something private and profound. Marina's mother was examining her, looking at the scars on her side where the rocks had cut her, at her hands and face, cataloging every change 8 years had brought. Then the mother looked at me. Her expression was complex, gratitude and anger and suspicion mixed together. She made a sound, questioning. Marina turned in her mother's arms and signed to me. She wants to know why you kept me. I'd been preparing for this question. I was afraid, I said. Afraid that if anyone knew she existed, they'd hurt her. Take her away, study her. I thought I was protecting her. Marina translated, her hands moving in gestures her mother seemed to understand. The mother watched me, her eyes never leaving mine. Then she made another sound, longer this time. She says you did protect me, Marina signed. She's grateful, but I should have been returned to the ocean, should have been brought to where our people gather. She could have found me. I didn't know where that was, I said. I didn't know your people existed. I didn't know what to do. More translation, more sounds from the mother growing more agitated. Marina's signs came faster. She says humans always take, always keep, never give back. She says my father was killed by humans, that our people avoid the surface because humans bring death. My stomach dropped. Marina, I never meant... I know, Marina signed, cutting me off. I told her you saved me, that you were kind, that you taught me and kept me safe. She understands, but she's still angry. Angry at the years lost. The mother made another sound and Marina's expression changed. She turned to me and her signs were hesitant, uncertain. She wants me to go with her now, to go home, to return to our people. Marina paused. She says I can't come back here. Too dangerous. Too many humans. She says I have to choose. And there it was. The choice I'd known was coming. Marina could stay with me in the world she knew, safe but confined, or she could leave with her mother, into the ocean, into a life among her own kind that she barely remembered. A life where I'd have no place. What do you want? I asked. Marina looked at me, then at her mother, then back at me. Her hands moved in signs I'd taught her years ago. Friend. Father. Love. Then she signed ocean and mother and home. She wanted both. And she couldn't have both. Marina and her mother stayed in the shallows for over an hour, communicating in ways I could only partially understand. Their vocalizations mixed with gestures, with touches, with body language that conveyed meaning beyond words. I sat on the rocks, watching, trying to give them space while remaining close enough that Marina knew I hadn't left. The mother kept Marina close, one arm always touching her daughter, as if afraid she might disappear again. They were catching up on 8 years in compressed moments. Marina trying to explain her life in the basement, the mother sharing news of their people, of the family Marina couldn't remember. I saw Marina's expression shift through emotions too complex to name. Joy at reunion, grief for lost time, confusion about where she belonged. Around noon, Marina swam back to where I sat. Her mother stayed in deeper water, watching, but allowing this conversation. "She wants to take me today," Marina signed. "Now, before anything changes." "And you want to go?" Marina signed yes, but the gesture was uncertain. "I want to know them, my people, my family. I want to swim in the ocean. I want to be with others like me." She paused. "But I'll miss you. Miss books and music and our conversations. Miss being safe." "The ocean can be safe," I said. "Your mother kept you safe before. She'll keep you safe again." "She says our people live deep, deeper than humans go. She says we have cities down there, structures made from coral and stone. She says there are dozens of us, maybe hundreds. I'll have siblings, cousins, a whole family I never knew." The thought should have made me happy for her. Instead, it felt like drowning. Marina was describing a world I could never access, a life that had no room for me. I was losing her to something bigger and more important than anything I could offer. "That sounds wonderful," I managed. Marina touched my hand. "She says I can't come back here, to the surface. She says it's too dangerous, that humans have hurt our people before, that if others like you found out about us, they'd hunt us, capture us, kill us." "I would never—" "I know, but she doesn't. She only sees what humans have done. She sees that you kept me for 8 years. She's grateful I survived, but she's angry about the method." I looked at the mother, floating in the deeper water. Her expression was unreadable from this distance, but her posture was tense, protective. She'd let Marina come to me for this conversation, but she wasn't comfortable with it. Every instinct she had was probably screaming at her to take Marina and leave. "What do you want me to do?" I asked. Marina signed slowly, carefully. "Let me go. Tell me it's okay to choose them, because I can't choose if I think it will hurt you." And there it was. Marina was waiting for my permission. After 8 years of me making every decision for her, she needed me to make this last one, to tell her it was okay to leave. "Of course it will hurt me," I said. "Losing you will be the hardest thing I've ever done. But Marina, you deserve a full life. You deserve to be with your own kind, to swim freely, to have a family beyond just me. I've always known this day might come. I just hoped I'd be ready when it did. You're not ready. No. But that's my problem, not yours. You need to go. You need to be with your mother, with your people. You need to live the life you were meant to have." Marina was crying again, her tears mixing with the salt water. "I don't want to forget you." "You won't," I said. "And I'll never forget you. These 8 years, raising you, teaching you, watching you grow, they've been the most important years of my life. You made me a better person, Marina. You taught me things about patience and love and sacrifice that I never understood before." She signed "Father" again, emphatic. "Yes," I said. "I'm your father. Biology doesn't matter. I raised you. I loved you. That makes me your father. And because I'm your father, I'm telling you it's time to go home, your real home, with your mother and your people." Marina launched herself out of the water, wrapping her arms around me one last time. I held her, feeling her heartbeat, memorizing the weight of her, the texture of her skin, the sound of her breathing. This was goodbye. The final goodbye. I'd known it was coming for months, but knowing didn't make it easier. "I love you," I said. "I'll always love you." Marina pulled back and signed "love you" and "thank you" and "thank Father." Then she signed something new, a gesture we'd never developed, her hands making a motion that suggested continuity, connection, permanence. I understood. She was telling me that leaving didn't mean forgetting, that I'd always be part of her, even if we never saw each other again. She swam back to her mother. They exchanged vocalizations, and then the mother looked at me one last time. She made a sound, long and complex, and Marina translated from the water. She says thank you for keeping me alive. She says she's sorry she can't let me return. She says maybe, someday, when the world is different, our kinds can know each other without fear. But not now. Not yet. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Marina raised one hand in a wave, a human gesture she'd learned from me. Then she and her mother turned toward the open ocean. I watched them swim away, watched Marina's smaller form beside her mother's larger one, moving in perfect synchronization. They swam strong and fast, heading toward deeper water, toward the continental shelf, toward the underwater world I'd never see. They surfaced once more, maybe 300 yards out. Marina looked back at the beach, at me standing there. She made one final vocalization, and even at that distance I heard the love in it. The gratitude, the goodbye. Then they dove, and they didn't surface again. I stood on that beach until sunset, watching the water, hoping for one more glimpse. It never came. Marina was gone. Back to her family, back to her people, back to a life I could never be part of. I walked back to my house and stood in the empty basement, looking at the pool that had been Marina's home for 8 years. The water was still, undisturbed. All her drawings were stacked on the shelf. Her favorite shells arranged in that pattern that meant home. Everything she'd left behind. I've kept the basement pool running. I test the water daily, adjust the salinity, clean the filters. Just in case. Just in case she ever wants to visit, ever needs a safe place on the surface, ever decides she wants to see her other father again. It's been 3 days. The cove is empty. No signs of mermaids, no mysterious calls in the night, just the normal sound of waves against rock, seabirds crying overhead, the wind through the trees. I don't know if I did the right thing. I saved Marina's life 8 years ago, but maybe I stole 8 years of her real life in the process. I gave her back to her mother, but maybe I should have fought harder to keep her, to give her the choice when she was old enough to make it herself. All I know is that somewhere out in the Pacific, 60 miles offshore where the water drops into darkness, Marina is swimming with her mother. She's meeting her family, learning the language of her people, discovering what it means to be a mermaid instead of a half-human hybrid raised in a basement pool. And I'm here, alone again, with nothing but memories and questions and the knowledge that for 8 years I was a father to something impossible, something beautiful, something that changed my understanding of what's real and what matters and what love means. I hope she's happy. I hope her mother forgives me for the years I kept her. I hope Marina remembers that I loved her, that everything I did was because I loved her, even when I was wrong. That's all I have left now. Hope, and an empty pool that I can't bring myself to drain, just in case she ever comes home.